Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Beck. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Trinity-Pawling School, and we are excited this evening to have you all join us for The Resilient Boy, fostering healthy masculinity, emotional intelligence, and mental well-being. And it's something that is really important to us as a school, but is also an important topic for boys, especially teenage boys. And so we're excited to share with you how we attack this challenge and take on the opportunity to lead our boys and mentor our boys in a world that is ever changing, that can be confusing, not maybe just for teenagers, but sometimes for us as well as adults. And so we want to take an advantage of an opportunity right now to share with you all the great things that we do here at Trinity Pawling. I would like to first let everybody know that they are welcome to ask questions either through the chat or the question and answer. We'll do our best to get to those towards the end of the event. But I would also tell you to be engaged if you can. If you do have questions, we're happy to get to those if possible. And then next, we're going to jump right in. I'll start with introductions, and we'll kind of go around. I'll start with our head of school, Mr. Bill Taylor. I'll let you take the floor here and start.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Taylor. I'm head of school at Trinity-Pawling. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to visit with us, and or if you're watching this later, thank you for taking time to watch this. We're excited about this series, hitting various topics through the school year on what we're doing at Trinity-Pawling to make a difference in the lives of boys and to hopefully fulfill our mission to make a transformational difference in the lives of the boys with whom we're working. So glad to have this opportunity to speak with you tonight about a very important topic, and that is resiliency and how to build resiliency assets. So we'll get into that shortly. Katie, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, good evening. I'm Katie Allen Berlandi, and I'm the Dean of Students here the Dean of Counseling of the students here at Trinity-Pawling. And I also teach a psychology class to primarily seniors. It's an elective course.
Good evening. My name is Dutch Keel, and I'm the Dean of Residential Life. In addition to that, I teach AP Biology, coach some lower sports, run some clubs. And again, welcome.
Tom?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Morris, Associate Head of School. I want to welcome you to this webinar.
And Dr. Lashley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marilyn Lashley, the Director of Health and Wellness and the nurse practitioner in the health center that takes care of all the boys.
Well, thank you all for the introductions. We're excited to hear from everybody this evening, and I'll start it off. Just the start of the actual title of the webinar, The Resilient Boy. But we'll start with you, Mr. Taylor. What is resilience, and why is that important for teenage boys? What is all the rage about resilience, and why do our boys need it, and how do they get it? So that's the first question we'll start with.
Good. Well, I would say everybody needs it, boys and girls. But I think in a boys' school, we can work on this in distinctive ways, and we'll share some of that with you here throughout this presentation. But resiliency, quite simply, is the ability to bounce back through adversity, to be able to cope with things, especially when things are not necessarily going your way. Perhaps some people grew up in a way that I did. I remember my father had a saying that he didn't create, but it was very much a big part of my childhood. And that was, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And his other favorite saying was, just deal with it. And of course, when you're a young kid and you get that kind of advice from a parent, you're sort of saying, well, what does that mean? Deal with it. Well, what he was basically saying is, you need to develop that ability to be resilient. So resiliency, that ability to bounce back, to cope through adversity, that ability develops over time if it's nurtured properly. And there are certain attributes, things that I will call assets, that will strengthen the foundation that allows us to be resilient, to bounce back through adversity. And so throughout this presentation, we'll talk about not just resiliency, but the assets that we're working to teach here at Trinity-Pawling that will allow boys to be resilient, to be able to learn how to bounce back, to cope through adversity. And some of these resiliency assets include just physical health, getting enough sleep, but others are the result of what schools can teach, what homes can teach, what culture reinforces, and so forth. Self-awareness, that ability to know yourself, is a critical resiliency asset. Relationships, especially in the teenage years, with caring adults that allow for a young person, in this case, a teenage boy, to better develop self-agency through self-awareness. But that relationships with caring adults, that's a critical avenue towards developing resiliency assets. And there's research out there that says if a teenager is having very healthy, supportive relationships with at least 3 adults who are not necessarily their parents, but also with parents' support, that's sort of a critical success factor in building these resiliency assets. The development of autonomy in the teenage years, which is the whole journey of adolescence, is the process of becoming, but also the process of becoming autonomous. And so having the ability to exercise that autonomy during these years is also a critical resiliency asset that is developing and can develop in teenage years. Having a caring community around you, having a community at home, but also in school, where there are clear boundaries and expectations, where there's a combination of accountability and support, working together. A challenging academic environment is also an avenue toward the development of resiliency assets, those skills that allow us to become resilient. And then the opportunity to practice problem-solving skills. That in and of itself is like weightlifting for the development of resiliency assets, learning how to problem solve. So when you think about these resiliency assets that I've just talked about, here at Trinity-Pawling, in a boarding environment, even if you're a day student, you have lots of opportunities to build these assets. In an all-boys environment, that development of these assets take on a special tone in and of themselves. But here at Trinity-Pawling, you look at things like culture. A school culture is incredibly important in all aspects of the learning that takes place there. The culture of a school reinforces the learning objectives. Similarly, the culture of the school will reinforce the resiliency assets that can be developed. When you have predictable routines, predictable structure, that helps build resiliency assets. Why? Because it creates familiarity, it creates confidence. When there's a sense of expecting, you sort of know what's coming. And then when something doesn't come the right way, you're in a safe environment. The relationships that are shared between adults here is, as I mentioned before, a critical factor in development of these assets. 90% of the faculty here live on campus. The boys see us in all different aspects of our lives. They see us walking our dogs. They see us with our kids. They see us in the dining hall. They see us in chapel. They see us in the classroom. They are developing relationships with many adults here. And it is a very caring environment. And that support is a critical component of developing these assets. Things like chapel and family style meals, which are very important cultural rituals here. And I use that term deliberately, rituals, because the rituals build familiarity and they become structures. But these rituals, chapel, family style meals, bring the community together. That deepens the bonds of relationships. When the bonds of relationships are deeper, there's greater trust, there's greater familiarity. That creates more opportunities for boys to be comfortable while being vulnerable. We ask the boys here at Trinity-Pawling to take a lot of healthy risks, to get up and do things that they haven't done. We've probably had over 25 students, maybe close to 30 so far this year, give chapel talks. Today, a senior gave a chapel talk on the topic of vulnerability. Getting up and speaking publicly is something that is very difficult for many people, most people. For a teenage boy, getting up in front of 350 people, your peers, your faculty, and speaking, that's challenging. But that builds a sense of confidence. And that foundation is also another resiliency asset. So the community coming together builds trust and so forth. Another key aspect of our learning environment is the focus that we place on effort. We have the effort challenge at Trinity-Pawling that dates back well over 50 years, where every student is evaluated on the basis of their academic achievement and their effort, not just in the classroom, but in all aspects of school life. And it's something that the boys take great pride in, is in their effort. Well, it should come as no surprise that effort is a key resiliency asset, because it allows boys to learn that they can accomplish goals by working hard. That improves their self-agency, that builds self-confidence, and then it becomes a cyclical dynamic of resiliency assets getting stronger, developing resiliency assets, but then getting stronger. And then in boarding school, you have lots of opportunities to practice problem-solving skills. You're in a rich environment with lots of interpersonal relationships. Sometimes those relationships are strained, and boys learn how to navigate through those instances. Alarm clocks sometimes don't go off on time, or you forget to set your alarm clock, and then you're racing in the morning to get to chapel or class. That actually is working on developing problem-solving skills. We don't encourage that on a daily basis, but you sleep through chapel, you sleep through class, you're gonna be much more certain to set your alarm the next day. That's resiliency, bouncing back through adversity. And then I would say that the role that autonomy plays in this environment is critically important. There's a good mixture here of lots of opportunities for autonomy to develop sort of independent voice, independent decisions, but within a much larger environment where there's predictable structure, where there's safety, and the boys know where the boundaries are, where the clear expectations are. And within that knowledge of where the boundaries are, what the expectations are, there's lots of opportunities for boys to begin to develop further autonomy, doing things on their own. We have a lot of elective classes here, for example, where boys can choose their courses. When we do our winter session and the boys are working on projects, they are choosing their projects. We give them lots of voice. The effort challenge is all about autonomy, because effort is always in every individual's control. They control that. That's an exercise in autonomy. That is building those resiliency assets as well. And lastly, I would say the all boys aspect of this is critically important, because in an all boys environment, boys can practice vulnerability in a much more open way than they would normally do in a co-ed environment. And I was the head of a co-ed school for 14 years. And I worked with a lot of kids, worked with a lot of boys in a co-ed environment. And I know, Jeff, you worked at a co-ed boarding school. There's a big difference between how boys act in an all-boys environment and how they act in a co-ed environment. And one of the key differences is this level of vulnerability. The boys here have a much longer runway to be vulnerable. They will develop the confidence to take healthy risks at a higher level because they're in this environment. And the boys support that. When a boy gets up and gives one of these chapel talks, or tries out for the play or does the play, as we just had last week, where we had a lot of newcomers in the play, and getting up on stage and taking those risks, the boys in the audience, the boys in the school are the ones who are, everybody's supportive of these boys taking these risks, but the boys support one another, and they are mutually building that sense of acceptance, embrace, really, of vulnerability. And again, vulnerability leads to the development of greater resiliency assets, because it's exercising decision making. It's taking risks that builds confidence, doing something that you may not want to do, but then you do it, and then you have that much more confidence in doing it the next time. Those are all, building that foundation that allows young people and adults to be resilient. Katie, I was reminded as we were preparing for this presentation of a survey, I think, done by the CDC in 3 or 4 years ago, where they surveyed over 7,000 or so high school students, and like 44% of those students surveyed in American high schools reported having sort of persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, that prevented them from actually participating in normal school activities. That's a huge number. I know when we all saw that, we were shocked. So, I'd like for you maybe to talk a little bit about how these resiliency assets can help students navigate emotional challenges.
Thank you so much, Bill. We are so fortunate here at Trinity-Pawling to have so many eyes on our boys. And we also are fortunate enough to be knowledgeable about studies such as this, right? So we know what we're working with as research indicates, right? So in looking at our students and how we want them to feel supported and to develop in healthy ways, we, as Bill has talked about, we have many opportunities to do that and avenues to do that here. But as we look at this topic of relationships with adults here, and we take that extremely seriously, as Bill has said, and ensuring that every student here has a positive, productive, and supportive relationship with at least one adult. I mean, I'd be hard to find one student here who's connected to one adult. I mean, there are many, many relationships in terms of adults and students. So, but these strong and meaningful relationships with adults set the platform for safety for these students, where they can feel heard, where they can ask questions, where they can be vulnerable. And that might be through a coach or an advisor or a dorm faculty. I mean, and staff included in this, right? There are lots of students who have important relationships with staff members here as well, who are beacons for them. But it's absolutely amazing to watch a student through that connection with an adult or adults form a greater sense of themselves, right? A confidence, as Bill has spoken about, and to watch their self-worth grow as they try different things, as they seek out help from other people, as they start to contribute to this community based on things that are of interest to them. And it's through that growth of the student and through via these relationships with adults and testing the waters that they then become examples for other kids. And so the trickle is definitely there. But for students, as we're looking at autonomy and agency, there's a sense of purpose that falls under that category, right? And so for students to discover their sense of purpose goes hand in hand with this growth of self-awareness and belief in one's self-worth. And that then needs to be honored by the community, right? For that to continue to grow and be nourished. And we as the adults here in this community, it is such an honor to witness that development of autonomy and purpose and agency in our students. And then as they flourish and impact the other students around them. And to be an adult here on campus is, I learned so much from the other members of the adult community in terms of how they engage in these very healthy relationships with students, and to witness their growth. So that's sort of what I'll touch upon in terms of the role of the adults in the adolescents' lives here, as they are seeking a sense of autonomy and agency and purpose.
Thank you. You know, I'm reminded of things that I've said at faculty meetings before, about curriculum, for example. You know, all schools have curricula, and it's what we teach. But all schools also have what I would call hidden curriculums. And that's what we're talking tonight, really, is the hidden curriculum at Trinity-Pawling. It's how we do things, why we do things, that are not just teaching subjects, but they're teaching life skills, which is extremely important, especially in a boarding school. That's the boarding school advantage. You have lots of opportunities for young people to learn these life skills and to practice them. And as educators, we have the advantage of time. We're have the opportunity to educate these boys in many different ways, because we have the gift of time here, because we're doing this 24/7. And so, Dutch, I'm going to turn to you, because we were talking about sort of the hidden curriculum. The residential life of the school is a big classroom for that hidden curriculum, how you learn to develop healthy relationships, and where there's vulnerability, where there's problem solving skills happening all the time. And all of that leads into this avenue of developing and teaching resiliency assets. So talk a little bit about what you see going on in the dorm life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our residential life is such a key component of teaching resiliency within boys, and our students. I came from a public school, so I did not have like a boarding situation. Like, I did not live away from home, and I'm incredibly jealous of our kids and what they're able to do, and just their ability to have some, and you mentioned this word a couple times, some autonomy in how they're going about their lives. They learn to clean their rooms on their own, to get along with a roommate, and all of those challenging social interactions that are sometimes really difficult to overcome, but are skills folks can learn. And they're doing that not by themselves. We have adults who are there to help guide and mentor. A lot of our students are living away from home for the very first time. To really guide and mentor them in figuring out how to like succeed in living in our community. We have a lot of peer leaders, and they are very good at finding students and being an ear for them to speak to, and a guide to help them as they learn to navigate taking their laundry out for the first time, picking up their laundry, keeping their room clean, even just managing all their time, managing all their things. There's a lot of pieces of learning that aren't necessarily happening in the classroom. And I think another piece where you really see this is in the leadership that students start to take on. There is a lot of problem solving that goes into leadership. You know, there are problems that come up that our students never would imagine coming up. And, you know, we have prefects who are seniors, we have proctors who are, you know, analogous to dorm RAs in college, we have club leaders, we have team captains, and there's so many challenges and problems to solve. And it's really remarkable to see the creativity of the problem solving of a lot of our kids in the dorms within leadership, but also seeing like how many times that those challenges that are put in their place are overcome, and they find really positive outcomes, and how much they're supported by other adults, by other students. A couple other places where, you know, we kind of can find this hidden curriculum is, you know, in our effort challenge. You know, Bill was talking about how it like definitely fosters some autonomy. I think it also fosters a lot of self-awareness, which is really important in building students' emotional intelligence, because um, some students, some teenagers, some adolescents are not always self-aware at how they're coming across and how their effort is being perceived. But we will be able to have those conversations with students by having like that assessment and effort. And every term, you know, our students are going on spring break pretty soon. When they come back, there will be a new set of effort marks as part of the effort challenge. And there will be a lot of conversations where students are like, how can I work harder, or how can I improve my effort? And I think that, you know, so many studies have shown that effort and success are really tied together. And then, you know, there's the opportunity to pursue kids' passions. And I think that's a really, really beneficial thing for students. That we have 50 or 60 clubs that are active, and there's chances for kids to interact with folks who have the similar passions and with other adults, and um, find problems to solve, find things that they're interested in, and just even socialize. I mean, some of the clubs we have are really directly tied to resilience. Katie teaches or leads a athletic injury club, and they are talking about how to overcome obstacles that have been put in their way. And some of our clubs are very social. You know, there's a 30 for 30 club where folks are just talking about 30 for 30 documentaries. And some of them are definitely trying to solve problems. You know, we have an entrepreneurship club, and those folks are trying to solve the problem of how best to start businesses and become entrepreneurs. Um, and, you know, I'm always impressed that all of these things happen, but within our pretty tight-knit community, there are so many other adults who have eyes on kids to support them and make sure there's a safety net when they're learning these skills and when they're, you know, forming and their emotional intelligences during these critical years. But there's also a lot of peers, and it's really inspiring to see how much our boys care for each other.
Yeah, I'm going to just throw in an example of a real concrete example of a recent problem, Dutch, that you helped a boy solve maybe last week, where a bat had flown into his room. That's a problem that probably he wasn't expecting to try to solve. And yes, we have bats outside. Sometimes bats get inside. Nobody likes it when that happened, but that was a problem that got solved. And I think he's a little bit more resilient, and so are you probably as a result.
Yes, that was not a problem I was looking for. Not the call I was expecting, at, you know, 9:30 at night. But, you know, when there's a problem, we all kind of chip in order to get the bat
Absolutely.
back out of the dorm room.
Yeah. Tom, I know you do a lot of work with the mentoring program of young, newer faculty, people who have just been hired in the last couple of years. Talk about some of the discussions you have with our faculty about their role in helping develop these resiliency assets of students.
Sure. Well, just to back up, to start with it, one of the things we're looking for when we're hiring new faculty are people who are drawn to working with young people first. It sounds sort of like the school of the obvious, but we really want to find adults who are drawn to caring about and working with kids, because that's going to shape their perspective on working in a 24/7 environment, and their willingness to be really intentional in how we talk about shaping resiliency with kids, shaping relationships with kids, and the way those relationships with kids fuel their experience. And so throughout the year, Tom Curley, our Dean of Teaching and Learning, and I meet with new faculty alone for dinner twice a month. And a lot of our discussions sort of circle around how we're being intentional about nurturing the culture within the school. How are we taking time to get to know the boys in our classes? How are we getting to know the boys in our advisory groups, the boys that live on the floors of our buildings? And so that thread about knowing our boys at a granular level as people and as learners is a constant throughout our work with new faculty. And then in turn, as they begin to know their students, they understand and they learn the power of that relationships with those kids have in terms of taking a healthy risk or building resiliency when something doesn't go well, or like, for example, the bat incident. We also, as a faculty, we devote a great deal of time in our in-services at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and then our faculty meetings to continually hitting on these themes of vulnerability, resiliency. And then we are also really intentional as a faculty about sort of pointing out examples where we have seen boys take the healthy, positive risk and have seen it play out well. And so there's a great deal of intentionality behind the scenes in helping faculty learn the culture, helping faculty know their role in nurturing it. But I will say one of the I've been in schools for a long time, and one of the most powerful things I've seen here at Trinity-Pawling is the degree to which the boys own the culture, the degree to which they are talking about vulnerability, they're talking about being resilient, they are talking about caring for one another, caring about one another, and it's a really powerful experience to see that play out day to day with high school boys.
Yeah. In our discussions tonight, talking about the environment and, having clear boundaries, but also the opportunity for autonomy to develop within those boundaries. I'm just thinking back on what was the cover story of the January edition of Atlantic magazine. I think the title was the isolated century or something. It talked about just the epidemic of loneliness and aloneness throughout our culture, but specifically also citing reference to high school kids, high school boys, and the amount of time that nationally teenagers and boys are spending time just isolated by themselves, not interacting with other people. So, Dr. Lashley, I'd love to have you sort of talk about sort of the health benefits that come with this combination of structured time, but also unstructured time, and the interactions, the healthy interactions, the relationships that are developing, even opportunities for kids to get outside and be outside, and how all that translates into sort of a healthy foundation for life.
Yeah, thank you. So I think having that balance of unstructured and structured time is really crucial for the overall well-being of teenage boys. The structured time, as it would suggest, so, what they're doing at school, their sports practices, their extracurricular activities, that really helps them to stay focused. It helps them to stay organized, and can give them really sort of a sense of purpose. And we know that leads to better academic performance, and it also teaches them some important life skills about just managing time. But having the structured time can really give them that sense of stability and control, which can be comforting. It can help to reduce symptoms of stress, symptoms of anxiety, depression. But we also need to balance that, because equally as important is that unstructured time, right? So the time that they can spend or decide how to spend without having that set schedule. There's really an opportunity when they have free time without obligations to get sort of that mental break. We know they're in a lot of high pressure situations, so unstructured time allows them to kind of, recharge, right? Refresh their minds. It also gives them, I think, an opportunity to engage in some self-reflection and even, to have, some sort of casual social interactions. And that really goes a long way in helping them understand their own emotions better, also how they relate to other people. Really, I think unstructured time can play a real role in helping them improve their emotional intelligence, and just really helping them manage their feelings more effectively. And certainly being outside as part of unstructured time, definitely fresh air, sunlight, right? All those things help boost immunity. It also leads to better sleep cycles, less screen time. Just, sunshine and fresh air can really boost their serotonin, right, and their dopamine, which helps fight depression. And I think also it just helps to improve focus and creativity and encourage some mindfulness. So I think really having a balanced schedule of unstructured and structured time really prevents them from feeling overwhelmed, and also isolated, which you just mentioned. It also gives them that time to pursue those passions that Dutch was talking about. So, the things that they're interested in outside their extracurricular commitments or even their academic commitments. And that goes a long way in terms of their mental well-being. So I think that balance helps contribute really to a positive sort of balanced life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're talking a lot about how this environment helps build resiliency assets. But, we're working with teenagers and they're all at a different level of acquiring these skills. And so, Katie, let's talk a little bit about how do we help boys who are struggling in developing these resiliency assets, who are struggling with trying to bounce back through adversity? What avenues do they have, and how does this community respond to those needs?
So what are some of the things that we might see in a student who is struggling? And you've mentioned, both of you have mentioned isolation. What does that mean? That means that they're spending a lot more time in their room. They might be at meal time, at dinner time or breakfast time when it's a cafeteria set up. They might be eating by themselves. They might be leaving their practices by themselves. Those kinds of behaviors, and then sort of leading into the disengagement from the community, the disengagement from things that might have been of interest to them before. We're observing those things. The lack of sleep, as Dr. Lashley spoke about, not eating as nutritionally as they possibly could be. A change in appearance, right? Maybe they're not dressed as sharply as they used to be, or maybe they've put on weight, or they've lost significant weight, or a decline in grades or class participation. These are things that our faculty has been very educated on in terms of observation of areas of where kids are struggling, and the process of bringing these concerns to light is we have a process of where if a teacher or advisor is concerned about a student, that concern is brought to our students of concern meeting, which happens every Tuesday. And that meeting is when we discuss students in a highly respectful way, with the goal of providing a plan for support or a plan for action. And that could be around academic supports, that could be around emotional supports, social supports. And in that meeting, there's representation from many members of the faculty and administration. And very often, when there is a concern around emotional strain, that student is referred to me or to Dr. Lashley. And we have a system or I have a system of reaching out to these these individual students to come and meet with me. And it is collaborative, because I will then need the support and the help and the guidance of those adults who do have a connection with that student at school. So that is the process. There are students who come to me and to other adults in this community with concerns about their friends, and that is an incredibly powerful element of this culture. And touching on, you know, brotherhood there, right? Brotherhood in my estimation is caring for their fellow students in a way that is beneficial to that student, right? And that's sometimes a hard thing for boys to understand, in terms of, I just want to protect my friend. I don't want to call them out, or I don't want to upset them by saying to an adult, I'm concerned about them, right? But it is always to be in the benefit of the brother, or the person who is in need. So so again, back to many eyes on these kids, and with that dorm fac and advisors and coaches and teachers. I mean, even members of our team in Scully, which is our dining room, our dining room. They love our boys so much, and they keep their eyes on them. And if they have a concern about a student, they will very respectfully reach out to a member of our community to support them. So there are a couple of informal avenues, but any student who is of concern is part of a bigger private discussion with the goal of supporting them in the best ways that we possibly can. And parents, of course, are more often than not involved in those conversations, because we rely deeply on how they know their boys, and how we can also be supportive of the parents, because it's
Well, I'm glad you brought up parents, and perhaps we could talk a little bit about that, because, you know, we can only be as successful with the boys as the success of our partnership with families and parents. And so for parents whose son is a boarding student or a day student, what can parents expect from the school in terms of communication of examples of the resiliency assets developing, or maybe they haven't kicked in completely, but both in sort of the showcasing the strengths, and then when there are times where, you know, we're helping a student develop those types of strengths and skills.
Well, we'll send home at the end of each marking period, we'll send home written comments. Excuse me. At the end of each term, we send home written comments, both as teachers and advisors, that highlight areas of success for the preceding term and also areas of growth. We have for our students, we have some that are on what we call plans of action, which are weekly updates written by teachers that, again, sort of take that scale of that sort of boil those recommendations for growth down to about a week at a time. That's one area where we can help. Also, advisors are in, you know, pretty consistent communication with families. Families will frequently say to their son's advisor, "Hey, please keep me up to date." And so it's not uncommon for an advisor to send a biweekly note home, just, "Hey, here's what I'm seeing with Johnny. He's doing great," et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and adding on to that, it's not only the grades, but, you know, our effort challenge is a really good way to see like where folks have like are building resiliency across the board, and not just necessarily the numbers that, and all of those numbers come out at the same time that grades come out, and advisors summarize everything or in their comments. And it's not just necessarily where folks start, but also seeing over years or over a year how the improvement within those effort marks as they, you know, maybe start in an acceptable range and find themselves moving up to like a commendable spot, and being able to take pride in that.
Great. You know, I spoke earlier about one of the key cultural components of developing these resiliency assets would be clear expectations in a school environment. And there's some really interesting research on academic success, however you want to define that. If it's, working hard to overcome challenge, or, getting improving in grades and aptitude in the classroom. But there's strong correlation between that type of academic focus and the discipline of doing school and all that means. And that correlates pretty highly with very healthy mental health habits and healthy resiliency development and so forth. So perhaps we can talk a little bit about that, sort of the expectations of what I call doing school. And that's just not school work, it's everything involved with going through the school day here. I mean, there are multiple commitments that a boy has every day here, and just navigating those responsibilities is developing a foundation of resiliency assets each day. So Dr. Lashley, perhaps from your perspective, from the health perspective, and Katie from mental health, talk a little bit about the relationship between that day-to-day activity of meeting obligations, of doing work, of doing homework, of meeting deadlines, and how that is helping in the larger health picture.
Yeah, I think again it gives them that sense of purpose, and so I think that that's definitely going to improve mental health. And on the flip side of that, I think we have to be really aware of some of the pressures, and sometimes it's the pressure that they put on themselves. But I think it's important for their mental health for them to understand that, their self-worth is not tied only to their accomplishments. Not only tied to their academic achievements, or not only tied to their athletic achievements. And so I think we have to help them understand that, they're more than the summation of that. And I think that's an important part of the conversation, and certainly an important conversation between, not only us here, but with their parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, I mean, sort of, if we go back to this high percentage of through this research of students who are who are having feelings of sadness and hopelessness. That's a picture of no purpose, right? And not feeling a sense of connection to other people, or a connection to an interest of pursuit, or a connection to a purpose, or any kind of supportive system, right? Despite the fact that maybe there are parents who are trying to support these kids and other people, but they're sort of locked in this place where they can't feel that sense of wholeness. And so we have the opportunity to provide a day and day after day of connections for these students. And it's through connections, whether it's with the grown-ups or the students, where kids learn a lot about themselves. And this is the biggest discovery time in their lives, this adolescent time, when they don't have the fully functioning brain to take it all in, right? And it's a little, I mean, I was speaking with a student about it the other day, and I said, it's a little bit like someone saying to me, if you could just run a marathon tomorrow, that would be great. And sometimes this is what it feels like for kids. They are trying to solve problems, to navigate their world, to impress other people, to learn from other people, to fail, and their decision-making capability is not fully formed, right? So it does feel like a marathon to them some days. And so I think reiterating what we can offer them in terms of the support and the pace at which they learn is the pace that it's going to be. And so that can hopefully help in their growth of self-awareness and their growth of self-worth, which only can help their mental health.
Yeah.
And we're here when it doesn't feel right for them.
Yeah. Right? I had a boy come to my office just this afternoon, who was clearly upset, and he shared with me that he had made a mistake. He took a shortcut in an area that he shouldn't have taken, and involved some academic dishonesty. And his eyes were welled up with tears, and he wanted to know what the process was going to be like, and what the consequences. And and I hadn't heard about this yet, so he was sharing this with me before anybody else had shared it with me. So that spoke volumes, that he would come in here and own it. But I said, you first thing you need to do is you need to be honest when you talk to this teacher about this, and you need to own it. And those are the two most important things. And the consequences will be the consequences. But being honest and owning it. And and that, I'm sure he continued to feel badly about his decision. But he realizes, okay, I can do that. I can own it, and I can be honest about it. And when you think about when any of us make a mistake, which we all make mistakes, that's an important part of how you recover from a mistake, owning it and being honest about it. And so even through that type of adversity, those resiliency assets are developing. Jeff, any questions that have come through?
No, there haven't been any questions. I'll encourage the folks that are in attendance to please submit. But I also want to, I feel like I've had the opportunity to kind of be a little bit of an attendee myself on this one. And I think I get an interesting glimpse into the world of how the boys operate. But I also get to meet the boys on the incoming, right? So the boys, when they're applying to the school, and what I'm hearing most often is that, and seeing, and maybe it's not articulated exactly, but sometimes boys don't feel like it's okay to be a boy, right? They're not allowed to like boy things. It's not acceptable to be masculine, right? And it's okay to be masculine. It's healthy to be masculine. It's okay to want to go play 3-on-3 basketball on a Friday night. It's okay to want to play some video games and eat some pizza and watch some eat pizza and wings and watch some football. That should be celebrated. Masculinity absolutely should be celebrated. I think that it's the toxicity, which could be feminine and or masculine, that isn't celebrated, that isn't acceptable. And unfortunately, boys have been labeled with that toxic masculinity, and it's a difficult label to overcome. But I think a place like Trinity-Pawling does an incredible job to give boys that freedom, autonomy, and areas and places to develop and make mistakes, as we've just heard, right? Like it's okay to make mistakes. It's growth, right? And our growth for our boys is not exponential, right? It's not linear, right? It looks a little bit more like a sine graph. It's up and down, and I think Trinity-Pawling specializes in that area where we see, okay, something's slipping right here, whether that's health, whether that's emotional, whether that's academic, or even athletic. And I think that's where we specialize with all the incredible professionals that you're seeing here today, but also all the other faculty that find a way to get that turned back up north again, right? So we do have an overall linear graph on a positive trajectory for our boys. And with the attendees this evening, pretty much split between some of them being current parents and families, and others being folks that have applied and or are applicants to our school. We're excited about sharing what we do and how we support boys. So I thank everybody on here. We did have one question, but I would love for that individual to go ahead and ask that question on the chat function there. In the meantime, I will get to the last bit here, which was the next Pride Perspective webinar, which will be April 30th at 7 p.m. The Power of Belonging. And helping boys thrive in a diverse world, which I'm excited that we will have both boys and faculty members to be a part of that panel. And that question did come through there. With regard to the effort grades, obviously there's an appreciation of the autonomy, but wanted to know for those students who may be more introverted, is there more coaching? Is there more mentoring that to help those boys develop their effort grades or help those boys kind of shine in that process? So I'll let folks go ahead and answer that question.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. The real distinctive aspect, there's so many distinctive aspects of the effort challenge, but from a teacher's perspective, teachers are asked to essentially individualize their assessment of every single student they're teaching, they're coaching, they're having their dorm. And in order to assess effort, you have to know that child, you have to know that young person pretty well. And you need to know what makes that boy who he is. And yes, we'll have plenty of introverted students here. And it's the teacher, it's the advisor, it's the dorm parent that is helping sort of develop that boy's comfort level with reaching out, to becoming more vocal within the context of his own comfort zone. And this is an environment. I mentioned the speaking in chapel. Where I sit in chapel is essentially right behind where a student would speak. And so I can see a boy's leg jumping up and down while he's giving the chapel talk. He's really nervous. Often it's a quieter boy that has done that is giving the chapel talk. And I will say to him, like I do anybody who's speaking, just how much I got out of the talk. And boys will say, boy, I never would have imagined I'd be doing that. Not even a week ago did I imagine I would be doing that. And you see that sort of that development of confidence happening, especially with the boys who are more on the quiet side when they get here. And those relationships bring that out. But the effort system, back to that, that is, that's a calibration that the teacher, the coach, the dorm parent, the advisor is recognizing the individuality of each boy and what effort looks like for that boy. And it's going to be different for that boy than it is for another boy. It's going to be much more of a risk for a quieter boy to speak up in a classroom, for example, or to ask a question than it is for a super gregarious boy who's used to talking all the time. And so that effort for one question, that could be, a significant achievement in that class. And that'll lead to 2 questions a week later and so forth as the confidence grows. So I think the effort system is incredibly important in that area.
Wonderful, thank you.
Jeff, if I could just.
So again, just a reminder, our Pride perspective.
Katie
I
wanted
just
to
wanted to
Jump
add
in, Kate, go
something,
ahead.
just going back to our culture, and just the value of the peer relationships here at Trinity-Pawling, and knowing so much is learned by one another within these peer relationships through observation, right? And kids have an opportunity all day long to observe their peers, right? And peers are not always making the best decisions all the time. But if we think about the conversations that can happen at the lunch table, and that's when an adult is around, right? But there can be really, really valuable conversations at the lunch table. They're on the bus rides, right? In the dorms, all those places, and observing other peers contribute productively in a classroom, right? And confidently in the classroom, or taking a risk in the classroom, or trying something new on campus, or demonstrating good eating and exercise habits, or supporting a younger student who's struggling. Those are avenues for kids to grow as well. So the peers are great teachers here, as well as the adults on the campus.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And again, for all those attendees, for our current families, the boys should be heading home tomorrow. So hope you get to enjoy them over spring break. Take some well-deserved rest and relaxation, and some catch-up time. And for those of you that are students that are applying or in that process. Our decisions will be released. You perhaps saw our Instagram post that our acceptance boxes were packed and sealed today and shipped out. So depending on where you live, we hope that they get there Monday, but they could get there a little earlier. We are very excited about that. And then lastly, again, just a reminder of our next Pride Perspective on April 30th, 7 p.m. The Power of Belonging, helping boys thrive in a diverse world with both students and faculty panelists. So again, thank you all to Mrs. Berlandi, to Mr. Keel, to Mr. Morris, Mr. Taylor, and Dr. Lashley. We appreciate your professionalism and your insight on how we support our boys here in emotionally mental health and create a happy campus, have our kids be excited to be here. And that's what it's all about. So thank you all. We appreciate your time and help, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Good night, all.